Imagine a world where power knows no color, where the streets of Harlem echo with the whispers of deals made in the shadows, and where the line between ally and enemy blurs with every passing moment. Welcome to the untold story of the black gangsters who dared to dance with the Mafia. In the heart of America's criminal underworld, 5 men rose from the ashes of segregation to carve their names into the annals of history. These were not just ordinary gangsters, they were the architects of a new era, the bridge between 2 worlds that had long been divided by race and tradition. From the cunning mind of Bumpy Johnson, the undisputed king of Harlem, to the strategic genius of Frank Matthews, the Black Caesar of narcotics, these men rewrote the rules of the game. They forged alliances that defied expectations, built empires that rivaled their Italian counterparts, and left a legacy that continues to fascinate us to this day. Join us as we delve into the lives of these 5 extraordinary figures who dared to challenge the status quo, who played a dangerous game of chess with some of the most powerful criminal organizations in history, and who, for better or worse, changed the face of organized crime forever. This is the story of the top 5 black gangsters who danced with the Mafia, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power in a world where the stakes are life and death. Are you ready to step into their world? Chapter 1: Shadows of the Underworld. The air was thick with tension, the kind that crackled like electricity through the dimly lit backrooms of Harlem. Here, in the shadows of the city's sprawling tenements, power knew no color, and alliances were forged in the darkness. It was a world where the line between lawful and lawless blurred, where ambition and survival trumped the constraints of race and society. Pernell Stacks Edwards stood at the center of this criminal web, his muscular frame and piercing gaze commanding attention. Once a bodyguard to the legendary Muhammad Ali, Stacks had traded his dreams of musical stardom for the lure of easy money and the thrill of the heist. Now, as he paced the floor of this nondescript safe house, the weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him. The Lufthansa job was supposed to be our big score, Stacks muttered, his voice laced with a mix of pride and trepidation. But Tommy, he screwed it all up. Now we're in deep. Across the room, Jeff Riddle, known as the Black John Gotti, leaned back in his chair, a toothpick clenched between his teeth. His scarred face betrayed a lifetime of hard-earned lessons in the art of survival. Ain't no one to blame but ourselves, Stacks. We knew the risks when we signed up for this game. The 2 men had forged an unlikely alliance, their paths converging in the treacherous world of organized crime. Stacks, the former bodyguard, and Riddle, the ambitious protege of a Youngstown mob boss, represented a new generation of black gangsters who had learned to navigate the predominantly white-controlled criminal underworld. Their stories were not unique. Across America, in the bustling cities of Harlem, Detroit, and Chicago, a new breed of criminal was emerging, one that challenged the traditional power structures of the Mafia and sought to carve out their own empires. From the legendary Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson in New York to the fearsome Francis Big Frank Nitti Usher in Detroit, these men had learned to leverage their connections, their cunning, and their willingness to use violence to secure a foothold in the shadows of the underworld. The rise of these black gangsters was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. Faced with the harsh realities of segregation, systemic racism, and limited economic opportunities, They had seized upon the only path to power and prosperity that seemed available to them: the world of organized crime. We're living in a time of change. Stacks, Riddle mused, his dark eyes narrowing. The old ways are crumbling, and the new ones are being forged in the crucible of the streets. It's a jungle out there, and only the strong survive. The sound of a door creaking open interrupted their conversation, and a third figure emerged from the shadows. Big Frank Nitti Usher, his towering frame and scarred visage, commanding the room. "You two better have a damn good plan to get us out of this mess," he growled, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Usher's rise to power in Detroit's heroin trade had been built on a foundation of ruthless efficiency and an unwavering commitment to his criminal empire. He had navigated the treacherous waters of the Italian Mafia, becoming a valuable asset and a feared adversary, all while maintaining a complex relationship with the justice system. "We're working on it, Frank," Stacks replied, his brow furrowing with worry. "But the heat is on, and we can't afford any more mistakes. Not after what happened with Tommy." The mention of that name sent a shiver down the spines of the three men. Tommy DeSimone, once a close friend and trusted accomplice, had betrayed them, leading to the unraveling of the Lufthansa Heist, one of the largest cash robberies in American history. The consequences of that fateful decision had reverberated through the criminal underworld, casting a long shadow over the lives of those who had dared to challenge the established order. As the trio sat in uneasy silence, the weight of their choices hung heavy in the air. The criminal landscape they navigated was a complex web of alliances, betrayals, and the constant struggle for power. And in this world, where the color of one's skin could mean the difference between success and failure, these black gangsters had learned to adapt, to forge their own paths, and to seize the opportunities that had long been denied them. The sound of a car engine rumbling outside broke the stillness, and the men tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for the weapons concealed beneath their clothing. In the world of the underworld, danger was never far away, and vigilance was the price of survival. Stacks, Riddle, and Usher exchanged a silent, knowing glance. They were part of a new generation, one that had risen from the ashes of segregation and systemic oppression to carve out a place for themselves in the shadows of America's criminal landscape. The impact of their actions would reverberate through the corridors of history, offering lessons on the intertwined nature of crime, culture, and the relentless pursuit of power. Chapter 2: The Rise of Black Gangsters. The shadows of the underworld had long been the domain of the Italian Mafia, a sprawling criminal empire that had carved out its territory through a ruthless combination of violence and cunning. But as the 20th century progressed, a new breed of gangsters began to emerge, men who refused to be confined by the color of their skin or the constraints of a segregated society. In the bustling cities of Harlem, Detroit, and Chicago, a generation of black gangsters rose to challenge the established order, forging alliances with the Mafia and carving out their own empires in the shadows of the underworld. These men, driven by ambition, resilience, and a refusal to accept the limitations imposed upon them, would leave an indelible mark on the history of organized crime in America. Pernell Stacks Edwards, a former bodyguard to Muhammad Ali, had seen firsthand the power and influence wielded by the criminal elite. Growing up in the impoverished neighborhoods of Harlem, he had witnessed the harsh realities of segregation, and the lack of economic opportunities available to young black men. Drawn to the allure of easy money and the thrill of the heist, Stax had traded his dreams of musical stardom for a life in the shadows. Across the country, in the gritty streets of Youngstown, Ohio, Jeff Riddle had risen through the ranks of the local mob, becoming a trusted lieutenant to the notorious Lenny Strollo. Known as the Black John Gotti, Riddle had honed his skills in the world of gambling and extortion, navigating the treacherous waters of the Italian Mafia with a cunning that belied his young age. In Detroit, France's Big Frank Nitti Usher had carved out his own empire in the heroin trade, leveraging his connections with the Italian Mafia to expand his criminal operations. Usher's rise to power was marked by a ruthlessness that made him both feared and respected, a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on the city's drug trade. Further west, in the bustling streets of Chicago, Mickey the Cobra Cogwell had become a vital link between the city's black street gangs and the Italian Mafia, shaping the flow of drugs and the distribution of power in the criminal underworld. Cogwell's cunning and charisma had allowed him to forge alliances that transcended racial boundaries, making him a formidable player in the game of organized crime. And in the heart of Harlem, Ellsworth "Bumpy" Johnson had risen to become the King of Harlem, a legendary figure whose influence and power extended far beyond the borders of his neighborhood. Johnson's story was one of resilience and ambition, a man who had learned to navigate the treacherous world of organized crime and emerge as a force to be reckoned with. These men, and countless others like them, represented a new generation of black gangsters who had seized upon the opportunities presented by the criminal underworld, leveraging their connections, their cunning, and their willingness to use violence to secure a foothold in a world that had long been dominated by the Italian Mafia. The rise of these black gangsters was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit, a reflection of the systemic barriers and limited economic opportunities that had been thrust upon their communities. Faced with the harsh realities of segregation and discrimination, they had turned to the only path to power and prosperity that seemed available to them, the world of organized crime. As they navigated the treacherous waters of the underworld, these black gangsters encountered a complex web of alliances, betrayals, and the constant struggle for power. They forged connections with the Italian Mafia, leveraging their expertise and resources to expand their own criminal empires, while also maintaining a delicate balance between their ambition and the need to protect their communities. The stories of Pernell "Stax" Edwards, Jeff Riddle, France's Big Frank Nitti Usher, Mickey the Cobra Cogwell, and Ellsworth "Bumpy" Johnson were not unique, but rather a reflection of a larger trend that was unfolding across America. These men, and countless others like them, had seized upon the opportunities presented by the criminal underworld, using their cunning, their connections, and their willingness to use violence to carve out their own empires in the shadows of society. As the 20th century progressed, the criminal landscape in America continued to evolve, with the rise of these black gangsters challenging the traditional power structures of the Mafia and shaping the trajectory of organized crime. Their stories, marked by both success and tragedy, would come to represent the complex interplay of race, power, and the relentless pursuit of the American dream. In the dimly lit back rooms and alleyways of the underworld, the shadows continued to conceal a world where ambition and survival trumped the constraints of race and society. And it was in these shadows that the stories of Pernell Stax Edwards, Jeff Riddle, Francis Big Frank Nitti Usher, Mickey the Cobra Cogwell, and Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson would unfold, offering a unique and compelling perspective on the evolution of organized crime in America. Chapter 3. Pernell Stax Edwards. The air was thick with the scent of stale cigarettes and the lingering tension that permeated the dimly lit back room. Pernell Stax Edwards paced the floor, his muscular frame casting long shadows across the worn linoleum. Once a bodyguard to the legendary Muhammad Ali, Stax had traded his dreams of musical stardom for the lure of easy money and the thrill of the heist. Now, as he stood before his associates, Jeff Riddle and Francis Big Frank Nitti Usher, the weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him. The Lufthansa Heist, one of the largest cash robberies in American history, was supposed to be their big score, the payday that would cement their place in the criminal underworld. But it had all gone horribly wrong. "I can't believe Tommy did this to us," Stax muttered, his brow furrowed with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We were supposed to be brothers, man. How could he just turn on us like that?" Riddle, known as the Black John Gotti, leaned back in his chair, a toothpick clenched between his teeth. "Ain't no one to blame but ourselves, Stax. We knew the risks when we signed up for this game, and now we're in deep." Usher, the towering figure of Big Frank Nitti, fixed Stax with a steely gaze. "You better have a damn good plan to get us out of this mess, or we're all going to be swimming with the fishes." Stax swallowed hard, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a strategy. The Lufthansa job had been the culmination of years of planning and carefully cultivated connections within the criminal underworld. But Tommy's betrayal had shattered their carefully constructed web of alliances, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. As Stax replayed the events of that fateful night, his thoughts drifted back to his humble beginnings in Harlem. Growing up in the impoverished neighborhoods, he had witnessed firsthand the harsh realities of segregation and the lack of economic opportunities available to young black men. The lure of easy money and the thrill of the heist had been too tempting to resist, and Stax had traded his dreams of musical stardom for a life in the shadows. Now, as he stood before his associates, Stax couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. The allure of power and wealth had blinded him to the true cost of his actions, and the consequences were beginning to catch up with him. "I should have known better than to trust that snake, Tommy," Stax muttered, his hands clenching into fists. "We were supposed to be a team, but he just couldn't resist the temptation to make a quick buck." Riddle nodded, his own experiences in the criminal underworld hardening his resolve. "That's the problem with this game, Stax. You can never trust anyone, not even your own blood. It's every man for himself out here." Usher's deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Well, we ain't got time to be pointing fingers. We got to figure out how we're going to get out of this mess before the heat comes down on us." The three men fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as they contemplated their next move. Stax knew that the stakes had never been higher. The Lufthansa heist had put them in the crosshairs of the law, and the consequences of their actions were beginning to catch up with them. As he stared out the grimy window, Stax couldn't help but think about the path that had led him to this moment. He had once dreamed of being a musician, of using his talent to lift himself and his community out of the cycle of poverty and despair. But the allure of the criminal underworld had been too strong, and now he found himself trapped in a web of his own making. "I never wanted this, you know," Stax said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted a better life, a way to take care of my family. But somehow, it all got twisted up." Riddle reached across the table, placing a hand on Stax's shoulder. "We all got our reasons for being here, man. But the game don't care about that. It's all about survival, and right now, we gotta figure out how to survive." Usher's gruff voice cut through the silence. "Well, sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves ain't gonna get the job done. We gotta start making some moves, and fast." The three men exchanged a silent, knowing glance. They were part of a new generation of black gangsters, men who had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of the criminal underworld and forge alliances with the Italian Mafia. But the Lufthansa Heist had shaken the foundations of their carefully constructed empire, and they knew that they were running out of time. As they began to hash out a plan, Stax couldn't help but think about the path that had led him to this moment. The dreams of musical stardom had long since faded, replaced by the harsh realities of the criminal life. But deep down, he still yearned for that sense of purpose, that feeling of being in control of his own destiny. "We gotta make this right, you guys," Stax said, his voice tinged with a desperate urgency. "I can't let Tommy's betrayal be the end of us. We've come too far to let it all slip through our fingers." Riddle and Usher nodded, their own ambitions and desires fueling their determination. In the shadows of the underworld, where power knew no color and alliances were forged in the darkness, these three men had carved out a place for themselves, and they weren't about to let it all crumble, not without a fight. As the sound of a car engine rumbled outside, the trio tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for the weapons concealed beneath their clothing. In the world of the underworld, danger was never far away, and vigilance was the price of survival. Stax, Riddle, and Usher exchanged a silent, knowing glance. They were part of a new generation, one that had risen from the ashes of segregation and systemic oppression to carve out a place for themselves in the shadows of America's criminal landscape. The impact of their actions would reverberate through the corridors of history, offering lessons on the intertwined nature of crime, culture, and the relentless pursuit of power. Chapter 4. Jeff Riddle and the Shakedown. The dim lighting of the back room cast long shadows across the faces of the three men gathered around the rickety table. Pernell Stax Edwards paced the floor, his brow furrowed with worry, while Francis Big Frank Nitti Usher leaned back in his chair, his piercing gaze fixed on the third figure, Jeff Riddle, known as the Black John Gotti. Riddle's scarred face betrayed a lifetime of hard-earned lessons in the art of survival. As he sat there, a toothpick clenched between his teeth, the weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him. The Lufthansa Heist, the infamous cash robbery that was supposed to be their big score, had gone horribly wrong, and now they were all facing the consequences. "So, what's the plan, Riddle?" Usher's deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We can't just sit around and wait for the heat to come down on us." Riddle leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he considered his next move. "We gotta go back to the basics, Frank. Shakedowns, extortion, the usual rackets. That's where the real money is, and it'll keep the heat off our backs for a while." Stax paused in his pacing, his muscular frame casting a long shadow across the room. "You really think that's going to be enough? After what happened with Tommy, the cops are going to be all over us." Riddle's scarred face hardened, a hint of anger flashing in his eyes. "Tommy was a goddamn snake, Stax. We can't trust anyone in this game, not even our own blood." That's the first lesson I learned from Lenny Strollo. The mention of Strollo's name sent a shiver down Stack's spine. Lenny Strollo, the notorious mob boss who had taken Riddle under his wing, was a force to be reckoned with in the criminal underworld of Youngstown, Ohio. And Riddle, his protege, had learned well the art of navigating the treacherous waters of organized crime. Lenny taught me a lot, Riddle continued, his voice low and steady. How to make the right connections, how to shake down the right people, and when to use a little muscle to get the job done. Usher's lips curled into a grim smile. That's what I like to hear, Riddle. We're going to need that kind of edge if we're going to get out of this mess. Riddle's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. I got a plan, but it's going to take some time to set it all up. We need to start making some moves, and fast. Stacks and Usher listened intently as Riddle laid out his strategy, his words laced with a confidence that belied the gravity of their situation. The plan involved a series of carefully orchestrated shakedowns, targeting local businesses and individuals with ties to the criminal underworld. It was a risky proposition, but Riddle was convinced that it was their best chance at securing the funds they needed to lay low and regroup. As the trio discussed the details of the plan, Riddle's mind drifted back to his own journey through the criminal landscape. Growing up in the impoverished neighborhoods of Youngstown, he had witnessed firsthand the harsh realities of segregation and the lack of economic opportunities available to young black men. The lure of easy money and the thrill of the heist had been too tempting to resist, and Riddle had quickly risen through the ranks of the local mob. His relationship with Lenny Strollo had been a complex one, marked by both loyalty and ambition. Strollo had taken Riddle under his wing, recognizing the young man's potential and grooming him to become a valuable asset in the family's criminal operations. But Riddle's own ambition had always simmered beneath the surface, and he knew that one day he would have to make a move to secure his own place in the hierarchy. The opportunity had presented itself when Ernie Biondillo, a rival mobster, had threatened to encroach on Strollo's territory. Riddle had orchestrated the assassination, cementing his reputation as a ruthless and efficient enforcer within the organization. But the act had also highlighted the fragility of the alliances that held the criminal underworld together, particularly in a racially segregated landscape. As Riddle outlined the details of the shakedown plan, he couldn't help but reflect on the shifting dynamics of power within the world of organized crime. The rise of black gangsters like himself and his associates had challenged the traditional dominance of the Italian Mafia, forcing the old guard to adapt and forge new alliances. "This ain't just about the money, you guys," Riddle said, his voice tinged with a sense of purpose. "It's about sending a message, about showing these white boys that we ain't going to be pushed around anymore." Stacks and Usher exchanged a knowing glance, recognizing the underlying current of racial tension that ran through their criminal enterprise. The world of the underworld might have been a place where power knew no color, but the realities of a segregated society still cast long shadows over their every move. As the trio finalized the details of their plan, the sound of a car engine rumbling outside broke the stillness. Instinctively, their hands reached for the weapons concealed beneath their clothing, a reminder that in the world of the underworld, danger was never far away. Riddle, Stacks, and Usher exchanged a silent, knowing glance. They were part of a new generation of black gangsters, men who had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of the criminal underworld and forge alliances with the Italian Mafia. But the Lufthansa Heist had shaken the foundations of their carefully constructed empire, and they knew that they were running out of time. As they stepped out into the night, the weight of their choices hung heavy in the air. The criminal landscape they navigated was a complex web of alliances, betrayals, and the constant struggle for power. And in this world, where the color of one's skin could mean the difference between success and failure, these men had learned to adapt, to forge their own paths, and to seize the opportunities that had long been denied them. The impact of their actions would reverberate through the corridors of history, offering lessons on the intertwined nature of crime, culture, and the relentless pursuit of power. For Jeff Riddle, the Black John Gotti, this was just the beginning of a journey that would forever shape the face of organized crime in America. Chapter 5. The Power Players, Usher and Cogwell. The dim lights of the basement bar cast long shadows across the faces of the two men seated at the corner table. Francis Big Frank Nitti Usher leaned back in his chair, his massive frame exuding an aura of controlled menace, while Mickey, the Cobra Cogwell, sat opposite him, his piercing gaze fixed on the older gangster. "So, Usher, what's this I hear about you getting mixed up in that triple homicide in Detroit?" Cogwell's voice was low and measured, his words laced with a hint of challenge. Usher's scarred face remained impassive as he took a long drag on his cigar, the ember glowing in the dim light. "That's old news, Cobra. The cops couldn't make it stick, and you know how it is in this game. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to protect your interests." Cogwell nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "I hear you, man. But you gotta be careful, you know? The heat's been on all of us since that Lufthansa job went south. Can't afford any more high-profile screw-ups." Usher's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Don't you worry about me, Cobra. I know how to handle the heat. Besides, I got connections that you city boys can only dream of." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You heard about what I've been doing with the Giacalone brothers down in Detroit?" Cogwell's eyes widened slightly, his interest piqued. "Yeah, I've heard the rumors. You and the Italians, huh? That's a bold move even for you, Usher." Usher chuckled, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Bold, maybe. But it's also smart. You can't survive in this game without making the right alliances, no matter what color your skin is." Cogwell nodded, his mind racing as he considered the implications of Usher's words. The relationship between black gangsters and the Italian Mafia had always been a complex and often tense one, marked by both cooperation and competition. But Usher's ability to forge such a powerful alliance was a testament to his cunning and influence. "So what's your angle, Usher?" Cogwell asked, leaning forward. "What's in it for you?" Usher's eyes narrowed as he took another drag on his cigar. "Power, Cobra. Pure and simple. The Giacalones know I can deliver, and they respect that. Together, we're going to dominate the heroin trade in this city, and nobody's going to be able to stop us." Cogwell whistled softly, his mind whirling with the implications of Usher's plan. The heroin trade had long been a lucrative but treacherous business, with the Italian Mafia and black street gangs vying for control. Usher's alliance with the Giacalones could shift the balance of power in a significant way. "You know, Usher, you might be onto something there," Cogwell said, his tone thoughtful. "I've been looking to expand my own operations, and the Italians could be a valuable asset. Maybe we should talk about working together on this." Usher's eyes narrowed as he considered Cogwell's proposal. The two men had long been rivals, their respective criminal empires overlapping in certain areas. But Usher recognized the potential benefits of a partnership, particularly in the face of the growing pressure from law enforcement and the fallout from the Lufthansa heist. "I'll tell you what, Cobra," Usher said, his voice low and steady. "You bring your connections with the street gangs, and I'll handle the Mafia side of things. Together, we can corner the market and make a killing." Cogwell nodded, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Sounds like a plan, Usher. But you know, we're going to have to be careful. Can't afford any more screw-ups like what happened with that triple homicide." Usher's expression darkened, a hint of anger flashing in his eyes. "That was a one-time thing, Cobra. I had my reasons, and the cops couldn't pin it on me. But you're right, we got to keep a low profile from now on." The two men fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as they contemplated the implications of their newfound alliance. The world of organized crime was a treacherous one, where alliances could shift in the blink of an eye, and betrayal was always lurking in the shadows. As they discussed the details of their plan, Cogwell couldn't help but reflect on his own journey through the criminal underworld. Growing up in the Chicago projects, he had seen firsthand the ravages of poverty and the lure of the street life. But unlike many of his peers, Cogwell had managed to navigate the complex web of gang politics and forge his own path to power. His relationship with the Italian Mafia had been a pragmatic one, born out of necessity rather than loyalty. Cogwell recognized the value of the Mafia's resources and connections, and he had worked tirelessly to position himself as a vital link between the Italian crime families and the black street gangs that controlled the drug trade in Chicago. But Cogwell's ambition had always been tempered by a sense of responsibility to his community. He knew that the drug trade had devastated the lives of countless young people, and he had made a conscious effort to mitigate the impact of his criminal activities on the neighborhoods he claimed to protect. As he listened to Usher outline his plans for the heroin trade, Cogwell couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. The sheer scale of their operation and the involvement of the Mafia raised the stakes significantly, and Cogwell couldn't shake the feeling that they were treading on dangerous ground. "You sure you can handle the Italians, Usher?" Cogwell asked, his voice laced with a hint of skepticism. "I mean, you're good, but those guys play for keeps, you know?" Usher's scarred face hardened, a glint of determination in his eyes. "I know what I'm doing, Cobra. The Giacalones respect me, and they know I can deliver. We're going to make a killing, and nobody's going to be able to stop us." Cogwell nodded slowly, his mind racing as he considered the implications of their alliance. The world of organized crime was a complex and ever-evolving landscape, and Cogwell knew that he and Usher were treading a fine line between success and ruin. As the two men shook hands, sealing their partnership, the shadows in the dimly lit basement seemed to grow longer, a silent reminder of the dangers that lurked in the criminal underworld. The impact of their actions would reverberate through the corridors of history, offering lessons on the intricate dance of power, race, and the relentless pursuit of wealth and influence in America's criminal landscape. Chapter 6. Ellsworth. Bumpy. Johnson, King of Harlem. The streets of Harlem were alive with the rhythm of life, the soulful melodies of jazz filtering through the air, the laughter of children playing in the alleys, and the hum of bustling activity that never seemed to fade, even in the dead of night. It was in this vibrant, yet often troubled community that Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson carved out his empire, rising from a troubled youth to become the undisputed king of Harlem. Born in 1905 in South Carolina, Johnson's early life was marked by the harsh realities of racial violence and segregation. As a young man, he fled the South, seeking refuge in the bustling streets of Harlem, where he quickly found himself drawn into the world of organized crime. It was here that he honed his skills, learning the intricate, chess-like strategies of the underworld from his mentor, William "Bub" Hewitt, a seasoned numbers runner. Under Hewitt's tutelage, Johnson's natural intelligence and cunning quickly became apparent. He possessed a keen eye for detail, an unwavering determination, and a ruthlessness that earned him the respect and fear of his peers. As he climbed the ranks, Johnson's ambition grew, and he set his sights on becoming the dominant force in Harlem's lucrative numbers racket. The stage was set for a showdown with the notorious Dutch Schultz, a powerful Italian-American gangster who had long since staked his claim on Harlem's criminal enterprises. The ensuing numbers war was a brutal and bloody affair, with both men vying for control of the lucrative underground betting operations that fueled the neighborhood's economy. Johnson's strategy was calculated and precise, leveraging his deep connections within the community to outmaneuver Schultz at every turn. He forged alliances with local businesses, politicians, and even the police, creating a web of influence that allowed him to maintain a firm grip on the numbers racket. His ruthlessness, however, was not without consequence, and the bodies of Schultz's men began to pile up as the war raged on. Ultimately, Johnson's cunning and resilience paid off, and he emerged victorious, solidifying his position as the undisputed king of Harlem. But his triumph was not without a heavy price. The violence and bloodshed that had accompanied his rise to power weighed heavily on his conscience, and he began to grapple with the moral implications of his actions. "I didn't want to be a gangster," Johnson would later reflect. "I wanted to be a businessman, to provide for my community." But the world I found myself in didn't leave much room for that kind of dream. As Johnson's power and influence grew, he sought to balance his criminal enterprises with a sense of social responsibility. He invested in local businesses, provided jobs and opportunities for the people of Harlem, and even used his connections to help secure funding for community development projects. In many ways, Johnson saw himself as a protector, a Robin Hood-esque figure who used the spoils of his criminal activities to uplift and empower his community. Yet, the duality of his nature was never far from the surface. Johnson's ruthlessness and ambition were never far from the surface, and he was willing to use violence and intimidation to maintain his hold on Harlem's underworld. His complex relationship with the Italian Mafia, whom he both cooperated and competed with, further highlighted the intricate web of power and alliances that defined the criminal landscape of the 20th century. Johnson's legacy would be cemented in popular culture, with his life story inspiring numerous films and books, each offering a different perspective on the King of Harlem. Some portrayed him as a Robin Hood-like figure, fighting for the rights of his community, while others depicted him as a cold-blooded criminal, willing to do whatever it took to maintain his grip on power. But the truth, as it often is, lay somewhere in between. Johnson was a complex and multifaceted individual, driven by a desire for wealth and influence, but also haunted by the moral consequences of his actions. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the intertwined nature of race, power, and crime in America, and the enduring impact that individuals can have on the course of history. As the sun set over Harlem, casting long shadows across the bustling streets, the legacy of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson continued to loom large, a testament to the resilience, ambition, and moral complexities that defined the criminal underworld of 20th century America. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of Bumpy Johnson and the black gangsters who danced with the Mafia, we invite you to join our community of history enthusiasts. Don't forget to like this post, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Johnson's legacy, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories from the criminal underworld. Help us spread these untold tales by sharing this post with your friends and family. Together, let's continue to explore the complex tapestry of American history. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you for watching.